Welcome once again to the live. Yesterday or in our last live, we looked at Invictus, a poem by Ernest William Henley that chronicles the never-giving spirit of a man or of the poet persona. So today I'll be looking at some devices and some themes as present in the poem. I will try to make today's lesson or today's live quite short and simple so that you can relate with it easily. So first of all, as a background information, Invictus is a Latin word that means unconquered or undefeated. And I think what attracted me to this poem and why I decided to teach this poem yesterday or in our previous class has to do with the poet's uh, determination never to give up and how he ended every stanza of the poem on a positive note. It looks like the beginning of the stanzas looks like something that is bleak, that is bound to fail, that is futile. But before you end every stanza, there is the call of strength. There is this unending spirit. The first stanza ended with a thank to the gods that created his unconquerable soul. The second stanza, as you can see on the screen, ended with the fact that problems might meet him, his head might be bloody, but he's never bowed, which means he never gave up. The third stanza obviously said he is unafraid of whatever challenges that will come and meet him. And the final stanza, which happens to be one of my favorite, ended with a couplet reassuring himself or confirming, educating and informing himself and every other person that he is the master of his fate and the captain of his soul. Today, we will look at some devices used by this poet to send his message. So in the first stanza, I'll try to make it easier and simpler. So in the first stanza, we have the use of devices such as metaphor, simile, imagery, alliteration, religious ambiguity or allusion. Now, quickly, let's look at the use of metaphor. Night is an extended metaphor that has been used to stand for suffering, hardship, pain, or despair. If you read the first line, out of the night that covers me, the speaker is not literally talking about night as end of day or as darkness, but rather is describing challenges, difficulties, obstacles that he has to circumvent or overcome. That is what the night refers to. So the night is used comparatively to difficulties. That's why we are calling it metaphorical. If you don't know what metaphors are or metaphor is, you can look to the channel. I had lessons on literary devices. The next device that is closely linked to metaphor is simile. Simile, as I said in one of my lessons, is a form of metaphor. The only difference between simile and metaphor has to do with how they are used. Simile uses us to do the comparison. Metaphor doesn't. So black as the pit, as indicated or as it is on the second line, is simile. I read, black as the pit from pole to pole. So comparing the difficult situations that he finds himself in, the darkness, the, the depth of the suffering to the pit, to a terrifying pit, to a deep pit, is using us makes it similar. So this particular line projects that the persona poet's suffering or the speaker's suffering is very intense and frightening. It's not shallow. It's not on the surface. It's deep. It's more intense than you can think of. It's evolving. It's growing. It's as deep as the depth of the pit. So that is the simile used over there. Now let's look at imagery. This entire poem is victorious, which literally means pain or sorry, unconquered, undefeated, has lots of images in them. Night paints visual image of pain, suffering, agony. Black paints similar image of pain, suffering. Pit paints another visual image of danger, intense pain, deeper pain. So the entire poem, the entire stanza of the poem is very full or so full of images. And if I'll say it again, if you haven't listened to my lesson on imagery, you can do that. Basically, we have different types of images. So this poem predominantly in this stanza use the visual imagery. So the weight of his situation have been presented through imagery. We also have some uses of alliteration, pitch from pole to pole, puff, puff, puff. So the puff sound in pitch, pole, and pole as present on the lines or in line 2 of stanza 1 is an alliteration, the repetition of the puff sound at the beginning of those words. Now, this gives that particular line a rhythm and try to emphasize how deep, how intense this pain is. Now, finally, with stanza 1, we can talk about ambiguity. Whatever gods may be, he is not certain of the gods. Whatever gods may be, when he was given the chance, there is no certainty, there's ambiguity. It does not fully depend on a clear religious belief, but he focuses on personal resilience, personal determination never to give in. Now, we can look at stanza 2. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have no wind nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody. Sorry, my head is bloody, but I'm bowed. Now, let's look at a few devices as used in stanza 2 of the poem. So you can talk about metaphor. Now, metaphorically, bludgeoning of chance is a kind of comparison between misfortunes that the person is going through and physical blow, a bludge. A bludge or a bludgeon is like a thumb that is landing on you, a blow that you receive, a physical blow. So comparing these two actually makes it metaphorical. So that is the metaphor over there. And basically this metaphor is just trying to bring out the speaker's suffering as an attack. In other words, he is trying to paint the picture that his suffering is an attack, the bludgeoning of chance. So it's someone attacking him. It could be physically, it could be spiritually. it could be emotional, it could be enemy, but his suffering is a form of an attack. That's what he's presenting over there. Then we also have another image. Like I stated earlier when I was talking about the visual imagery in stanza 1, I said this poem Invictus is full of images. So words like clutch, bludgeoning, bloody, and bowed all create images of battles. Bludgeoning creates an auditory image, sound. When they hit you with the blow or the fist, you can feel the sound. Then we have something that clutches, another auditory image, bloody visual image, and bowed visual image. Together, it presents the speaker as someone who appears like a wounded fighter. I just mentioned earlier when I was explaining the metaphor that his suffering is an attack. Then we have contrast. Bloody clearly contrasts with and bowed. If your head is bloody, that is the point of giving up. You bow down your head as a sign of giving up. But his head is still unbowed. So there's a contrast there. Basically, contrast means two opposite things, two things that are opposite. So he has a bloody head, but instead of bowing down his head, he never bowed, he never gave in. So that is the contrast overlay. Now we can also basically talk about his tone, even though this is not, or some authorities might tell you that tone isn't part of, how do I put it? Tone isn't part of literary devices. It is on its own to some extent. I see it as a literary device. So his tone is that of a defiance or controlled. It does not sound weak, and there was no form of self-pity. He sounds determined. He sounds strong, never ready to give up. Stanza 3. So we'll just look at the next two stanzas briefly, then we'll bring this to an end. So in the third stanza, beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. Yet the menace of the year or the years finds and shall find me unafraid. So in the stanza 3 of the poem, this man also used metaphor, personification, foreshadowing, imagery, repetition. But since I've explained metaphor already, I'll just say the metaphor and the personification. Then I explain the foreshadowing. Now, place of wrath and tears is a metaphor for humans or human beings or life on earth or in the world as just suffering. This is the place where we need to suffer. Personification, the menace of the years. It gives time or years a threatening personality. Menace, a threatening personality. So like the menace of the years that he used over there, actually it's like menace simply means danger. So it's giving this world, this earth, a threatening kind of personality, like I said. The future is treated like something that approaches and challenges the speaker. The future is treated as something that is threatening and challenges you. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing. I had a lesson where I explained into details the meaning of foreshadowing or foreshadow and that of flashback. This stanza predicts the future. Basically, that is foreshadowing. When a writer, in this case the poet, tries to predict the future in his or her writing. So the stanza looks ahead to death and future suffering. it suggests that the persona or the speaker's struggles are not yet over. There is more ahead to come. Imagery has been used again. Horror is, it can be any type of image depending on how you use it. Visual, auditory, shake, rap, tears. They all create a certain form of gloomy atmosphere. The poet does not in any way ignore the fear. He confronts them directly. And that's what I love about this poem. There have been few repetitions in the poem. Finds shall find me unafraid. So continuity is being used over here. Finally, the stanza 5 of the poem. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So here we'll look at some allusions, metaphors, repetitions, parallelisms, and symbolism, which is a form of imagery. Okay. Straight the gate may be biblical language that alludes to the narrow gate they talk about. So this point uses the religious imagery, but try to relate it to personal experience or experiences. Metaphor, master of my faith. So there's a kind of and captain of my soul, a metaphor of self-control, self-awareness and self-control. Repetitions, I am, I am, has been repeated. And this basically emphasizes his confidence in what he's saying, his identity and his personal authority that he will never give up. Giving up isn't part of what he plans to do or he plans to do. Parallelism, parallelism, Parallelism. Parallelism. I am the master of my faith. I am the captain of my soul. Uses similar grammatical structures. I am. I being the subject, am the verb. An auxiliary verb are functioning here as the main verb. The master of my soul, the captain, the master of my faith, the captain of my soul. And this makes the ending balanced. It makes it poetic. It makes it memorable. It makes it powerful. Sorry, it makes it powerful. So that is parallelism used over there. Now let's look at symbolism. The gate symbolizes difficulties or judgment. The scroll symbolizes faith, destiny, or moral accountability. The captain symbolizes control and leadership. So symbolism means something that stands for more than itself. Now, overall, you will realize that this poem Invictus has 4 stanzas, and each stanza has 4 lines. We call a 4-line poem or stanza a quatrain. It uses a regular structure that gives the poem a controlled and disciplined feeling that comparatively matches the speaker's attitude. Try to check the rhyme scheme, ABAB. It creates order and rhythm, and the order contrasts with the chaos that the persona is going through. The order in the poem contrasts with the chaos that the persona is going through. What I have for you finally is that Invictus states clearly that life may bring darkness, life may bring pain, life may bring fears, and life may bring uncertainties. But a person can still choose courage, dignity, and self-command. You may not control every event in life, but you must insist that you remain responsible for your soul and for suffering. Never give up. In our next lesson, I'll still be on this poem, but I'll look at some themes in the poem. Then we'll bring this poem to an end and start with another poem. If you have a suggestion of a poem you want me to teach, just write it in the comment section and I'll do justice to it. For now, bye bye.